This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. Will we see anytime soon an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine? Will the negotiations which are taking place now between Trump and Putin, and also to an extent Zelensky and the Europeans, will they lead to an end of the war? Will the ceasefire really take hold? I do not believe that that is going to be the case. And I'm not alone with that opinion. I like to bring you up to date with what is happening, but I will also tell you what is going to happen in the future, but not right now. Most people feel, most newspapers, most media outlets feel that Putin cannot be trusted and that Putin is not going to agree to any ceasefire. And if he does, he will find a way to break it. Or maybe somebody else will break it, but the point being it's not going to last, like the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Didn't last, and that was predictable that it wouldn't last. I'd like to begin with an article by Fox News, which is, without any question, pro-Trump. They wrote on March 14. Zelensky is correct. Peace in Ukraine is a long way off. Putin is highly unlikely to accept President Trump's current peace plan. Now, this was written before this famous phone call between Trump and Putin. The article goes on to say, with all due respect to President Trump and his accomplishments, the Russia-Ukraine situation is extremely complex. Russia has a very different strategic culture from Western culture. On March 6, Putin publicly ruled out making any concessions on Ukraine. Putin believes he can call the shots. Russia is capable of dragging his war out for years. Putin has indicated multiple times that a temporary break in fighting was out of the question. Russia now produces more weapons in 3 months than the entire NATO alliance in 1 year. Putin ruled out negotiating with Zelensky, having told state TV that he, Zelensky, has no right to sign anything, having called the Ukrainian leader illegitimate. So far, Fox News. Now here's an article by The Mirror, dated March 13. One defense and security analyst told The Mirror that he does not believe the US be able to persuade Russia to change its position, and that the West should be prepared for war with Russia. Michael Clark said the Kremlin also has an agenda to weaken Europe in all ways possible, and thinks it is on a roll now, so there will be a sense of military momentum behind what Russia plans next. He said any ceasefire that is reached would be an unstable truce from the start. Politico wrote on March 14 that US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the ball was in Russian President Vladimir Putin's court. But it was an easier ball for the Russian leader to play than many thought. It was classic Putin. There was no firm Russian yet to stoke the US leader's anger, rather a teacher's applause for Trump's idea and effort. The temporary truce was correct and we supported, the Russian leader said, but, alas, there were many sticking points. It was all drawn from the playbook that he and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have used time and again. Now, this article by Bild Online, dated March 14, is quite revealing, and Bild was not the only paper bringing this out. It says, Ukrainians are threatened with a massacre in Kirks, Putin claims, and Trump is portraying himself online as their savior. But the whole story is nonsense. Putin claimed in Moscow, a 30-day ceasefire is beneficial for Ukraine, as all its military personnel are blocked in the Kirks region. Putin added, verbatim, it is becoming increasingly impossible for the Ukrainian military to escape the encirclement. Complete nonsense. Except for small groups of Ukrainian soldiers, about 25 men in total, thousands of Ukrainians have managed to withdraw from Kursk. Hard to believe. The day after the baseless claim, US President Donald Trump repeated Putin's propaganda. Thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military, Trump said on his network Truth Social. He asked Putin to spare their lives to prevent a horrific massacre. This would be a horrific massacre, the likes of which has not been seen since World War II, Trump wrote, completely beside the point. And after that came the famous phone call between Trump and Putin. Now, Deutsche Welle wrote on March 18 and March 19, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump agreed in a phone call that Russia and Ukraine stop attacking each other's energy infrastructure for 30 days. It was emphasized that the key condition for preventing the escalation of the conflict and working towards its resolution by political and diplomatic means should be a complete cessation of foreign military assistance and the provision of intelligence information to Kyiv, the Kremlin said. We have seen that attacks on civilian infrastructure have not eased at all in the first night after this supposedly groundbreaking great phone call between Putin and Trump, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said, adding that Putin is playing a game. The German minister also described as unacceptable the Kremlin's insistence that a key condition for peace would be a complete halt to Western military and intelligence support for Ukraine's embattled military. Germany is set to deliver additional military supplies to Ukraine this year. The package includes 3 billion euros in aid for 2025 and a further 8.3 billion euros for the years 2026 and 2029, or until 2029. And so, the Sun wrote on March 18 and March 19, Putin's red lines remain intact, and he has not shifted from his original goals of a NATO rollback in Eastern Europe or a demilitarized Ukraine. The Russian said that he would not agree to a full ceasefire until all military aid to Ukraine from the US and its allies stopped. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, French President Emmanuel Macron have vowed to keep arming Ukraine, directly pushing back against Putin's demand for a complete cessation of Western military support. It is a sign of how badly Donald Trump has been played. The latest was reported on March 19 by Bild Online as follows. The US is prepared to take ownership of Ukrainian nuclear power plants. This means that if the facilities are attacked, it would be an attack on America. Trump told Zelensky that the US, with its expertise in electricity and energy supply, could be very useful in operating these power plants, the White House said. American ownership of these facilities would be the last and would be the best protection for this infrastructure and support for Ukrainians' energy infrastructure, the White House said. Now, Trump is never going to get that through because Putin will never agree to this. In other words, the idea being there would be no ceasefire if that would go through. It would be completely, totally against Putin's plans. Now, as I said earlier, there will be finally an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. I can say that with confidence because the Bible tells us that in the end, right prior to Christ's return, let's say a year or so prior to Christ's return, a confederacy of nations from the Far East, including Ukraine, including Russia, including China, including other Far Eastern nations, will fight against Europe. That is prophesied very clearly. The Bible calls this confederation the kings from the East. But that is in the future. That is not now. But somehow a unification between Russia and Ukraine will have to take place. Now, we don't know exactly how that is going to happen, but it's going to happen. So all these interesting ideas which are floating around now to make an end to war are doomed to failure because it's not going to happen that way. You see, the problem is man doesn't know the way to peace. They are trying to operate from strength, and that is the MO which has caused war after war after war, and has never brought peace. General MacArthur once said very clearly that it has to be through the Spirit and by the Spirit if we want to save the flesh. It has to be through a completely different and total change in thinking. That is not the case today. This world is not God's world. This is Satan's world. Satan is the ruler of this world. He is a god of this world, and he has deceived the whole world. And so people think that they can bring about peace through the means of war, weapons. And this is not going to happen. It won't happen. Christ tells you, put your sword away, because everyone who takes a sword will perish by the sword. This is not the way of thinking of the world, of this carnal human nature. You can have all kinds of ideas as to how to bring about peace. It has never worked. It will never work, because your mind, the carnal mind of people, is not in conformity with the mind of God. Only after Christ has returned to this earth, and only after he begins to rule, and he will rule with people who have adopted this mindset, will there be peace. Then people will start to think in terms of, well, let's not learn war anymore. Let's change and exchange our weapons to instruments of agriculture and other instruments, peaceful instruments. It has to be by the Spirit if we want to save the flesh. And it's going to happen, but not before Christ returns. In fact, Christ is telling us, if he were not to return, if those days in the future wouldn't be shortened, no flesh would be saved alive. That means not only would all human beings be killed, even animals would be killed. But Christ says, I am coming back. I am going to shorten these days so that this madness can end. He says it's going to happen because for the elect's sake, because otherwise they would also be killed in this coming war, this terrible nuclear war, which is clearly prophesied to happen. We can be part of these elects. We can already now, if God works with us, and if we accept his way of thinking, we can already now change our way, how we believe, how we think, and what we do. We have prepared a free booklet, Should You Fight in War? A good question. Many people would perhaps say no at this point, but then when the time comes, they are more than ready to go to war. This booklet explains to you from the Bible what God has to say about this, and why going to war will only lead, and I emphasize the word only, misery, pain, suffering, and death. Let's not be part of the great mainstream concepts, but be different. Become one of the elects, and you will know that you are following God in the right way. Thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.